Recently, activist Wang, who were one of the leaders in the protests that ultimately led to the Tiananmen Square massacre, was accused of sexual assault. The Chinese activist community is furious. The Chinese government propaganda machine is also having a blast. My belief is that we shouldn't jump to conclusions so fast. Just take a look at the false accusation of domestic violence against Johnny Depp and the accusation of pedophile against Michael Jackson. Even though they were both later cleared innocent by the court, the damage was already done. Though at the moment most of the accused in Me Too movement are indeed guilty, we should not assume everyone else is guilty. Otherwise, all it takes is a false sexual assault accusation to destroy the reputation of someone you had a very small beef with. That is why it is simply too early to pass judgment on Wang Dan. We should at least wait for some kind of investigation from the judicial system in Taiwan or US. It is not too late to pass judgment when that happens. There are also a small number of people who have a problem with the activist potentially being gay. That is just low. It is the 21st century. Deal with it. Frankly, former student leaders like Wang Dan, who fighted for the democracy in China back in Tiananmen Square massacre, didn't really achieve anything after running away from China. However, I wouldn't call this their fault. After China joined the World Trade Organization and before Xi Jinping took power, the Chinese Communist government hid a lot of their shit behind economic growth. On the diplomatic stage, they pretend to be non-aggressive while only occasionally stab other countries in the back. It was extremely difficult for those Chinese activists in exile to get much support internationally. Due to the Chinese Communist government's strict media and internet blackout, it is also very difficult for the new generation of Chinese to know much about the Tiananmen Square massacre or the activists who were there. A recent report by Radio Free China shows that most Chinese who were born after the Tiananmen Square massacre and still know about it did not learn from those older generation activists. Most people like me only learned about those activists after learning about the Tiananmen Square massacre. On the other hand, if these older generation activists didn't shout into deaf ear, there probably would be less people who know about the Tiananmen Square massacre. For the Chinese Communist government, these old school activists are also the constant reminder of how illegal their rule in China actually is. The Chinese Communist government is also constantly trying to squash any potential leader of the Chinese democracy movement. Chinese activists who recently rose to fame on Twitter, such as Toronto Squareface and Teacher Lee, were all targeted by the Chinese Communist government. Their real identity were discovered and their family was threatened by the Chinese Communist government. Even if you live in exile outside China, even if your family live in exile outside China with you, the Chinese government can still target your family's family, your former colleagues, your friends, and your former classmates in China to find out who you are and threaten you. At the moment, the Chinese activists both in China and in exile are unorganized. Just like the recent White Paper revolution, there is no clear leader for the Chinese Communist government to catch, which helped the democracy movement from being stopped prematurely. The downside is that without a leader, a democracy movement in China tends to lose momentum very fast if the Chinese government caved a little bit, even though nothing fundamentally changed. Back in the White Paper revolution, the moment dictator Xi Jinping stopped the zero-COVID policy, the Chinese taxpayers forgot the time that they suffered due to Xi Jinping's stupidity. Personally, I think this is only temporary. It is like sweeping dirt under the rug. At some point, there will be too much dirt under the rug for the Chinese Communist government to face. As the Chinese taxpayers losing their trust on the Chinese Communist government solving any kind of social problem, there would be more protest. As a result of the diminishing trust, the Chinese Communist government are having hard time pushing their policies, such as the Chinese version of their 401k and the digital Chinese currency. The Chinese taxpayers can't protest, so they chose to deal with it passive-aggressively. This year, the farmers in Henan province in China were the victims of several Chinese government bullshit policy. Some farmers in the region are already talking about giving up farming for the rest of the year. If you like my video, please subscribe.